We are back and ready to go with match number 2 coming right up for Grandmasters this season. I'm loving it so far. Ball control having a great first match. Zim not doing so well, but honestly, I feel like ball control took it out of his hands to a certain extent, especially in that last game when the Zephyrus just came out of absolutely nowhere. But who have we got coming up next, Sot?
We have got an absolute corker coming up next. It is going to be Thijs versus Hunterace, and we talked about this a little bit in the intro to the show. Thijs, perhaps the dominant force in Hearthstone throughout maybe 2015 era, going up against Hunterace, who is, undisputably one of the top 2 players of the past 2 combined years of competitive Hearthstone, I would say. Former world champion and was pretty much uncontested by anyone not named Just Saying in the whole period throughout that whole season in terms of his dominance over the scene. So this is a real old school versus new school battle. Thijs, as you take a look at his lineup, much more focused, I would say, on streaming and entertaining, and building a community. It's a huge community that he has around him. I'm sure there's a ton of support for him in the chat right now, but still, when it comes time to flick the switch, make no mistake about it, this guy is still an absolute monster.
Yeah, and funnily enough, I was watching Ball Control stream the other day, and Thijs came up, and it's like, oh, Thijs did well in the Swiss, and some of the viewers were like, oh, that's a bit of a surprise, it's just a stream, and Ball Control was like, Thijs plays probably more Hearthstone than almost anyone every day. You're gonna be good if you play this game every day for a million hours. You don't get bad just because you're streaming it. You know what I mean? Someone like Thijs, who has proven his competitive capabilities in the past, he keeps himself sharp by playing 10 hours a day. Who would have thunk it? But moving on to Hunterace, we all know and love him, and he is bringing something a little bit spicy. It is a priest, and it is a resurrect priest, so it hurts my soul quite deeply. But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because it is Hunterace, and he is bringing a few spicy cards with the Murazond and the Soul Mirror.
Yeah, Soul Mirror is just a sweet card. Cool stuff happens every time you cast that thing. It's just such a weird effect to have those symmetrical attacks going off every turn. But yeah, Res Priest, new to us at least. We're only 2 series in, but it's a deck that we have not got to see yet. We have been seeing the Demon Hunter and the No Hands Warrior, but another talking point is just how popular that No Hands Warrior is between the European contingent, because from what we saw in APAC before this, it was mostly Bomb Warrior when the Warriors came out, and they're fairly similar. You actually play maybe 18-ish to 20 of the same cards in there, where you still have the Armor Smiths and the Risky Skippers and the Battle Rages and all the ways to do that kind of stuff. It's just different, what you're sprinkling in there on top of that. Whereas Asia Pacific were going with the bomb cards and the Blastmaster Boom. This is more the No Hands Gamer version of Warrior with the eggs and so on that we're seeing in Europe now. So already you're starting to see differences in opinion between the 2 regions.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting to see how that continues, because I do think the first week is always the tester, right? Because now every region can see every other region's deck lists, how they did in Swiss, how they performed in groups, and so on, and go from there. Whereas the first week is always like, well, I hope this is a good lineup. Let's see, see and find out. So not only do you get info on your other competitors in your own region, you get to see what the rest of the world is doing as well. But I do like the Bomb Warrior style, but I feel like it has different, certain strengths that are very predictable, and it's a little bit easier to pilot. But the No Hands list, you can do some insane things with it with very little materials to work with, and I think that's really going to reward some of the more what's the way to describe it? I don't know. So some of the players that just really like those super intricate, minuscule play and optimization styles of decks.
Yeah, like Hunterace, for example.
Yes.
I definitely agree with you. I think the deck is incredibly intricate. I think the mirror specifically is impossible.
Yes, I was going to say.
How do you play that mirror match perfectly? I don't think such a thing exists. There's just so much stuff that you have to keep in mind and playing around, and everything's so weirdly symmetrical that mirror match in particular is a nightmare. But the deck in general is very, very intricate, very, very difficult, to the point where when you try it for the first time, you're like, oh, this is just some trashy meme deck, and then game by game, step by step, you start to get a handle on what's going on and start to unlock the actual true power potential of the deck.
Yeah, and I think, as I mentioned earlier, there is a long way to go in terms of not only deck building, but then just, mastering. Even with Demon Hunter right now, not only players are trying out different versions of the list, but players are jamming tons of games just to work out what to even do. Like, what do you do on turn one? What are these plays with the, the outcast mechanic? What do you keep? What do you not? When do you push? All of these questions are being asked just for the new class, never mind all the other new decks that are possible and the decks that people are playing right now. So there's definitely a lot to learn here, and even Hunterace bringing this priest, this isn't what I would say a standard res priest at all. There are some differences, shadowy figures in there as well, the mana sabers are in there, so it's not just I'm going to make taunts and res them until you get bored and concede because you've got something to do that day. It's actually other things that you have to consider, because you can't just go, oh, I'll res and get a taunt if there's mana sabers, albatross in your deck. You've got to be more cognizant of what are the outs and how the deck even works to make that work. But Sol, the impossible has to become possible because we're about to cast the Warrior Mirror.
Literally impossible.
Yeah, let's just be quiet and watch then if it's impossible.
Going by Hunterace's POV right now, the only thing more impossible than playing this this matchup is positioning a green screen and a camera in front of each other. What is that?
So Derek and I had a very fun game during Asia Pacific last year where we were just judging some of the green screen positions. And I want to say it was Blood Trail. I might be wrong, so I apologize if I am. He literally had his green screen running parallel to where he was looking on his chair. So it was literally against the side wall and the camera just was barely even on it. And it's like, that's not quite how a green screen works. Hunterace trying to chase the dream there, and he had it at a slight angle. But not quite at what we're after, but we'll give him marks for trying at least. But let's get into this matchup. 2 Tolvairs available for each player. But also that Corsair cache is huge.
Yeah, it is, and with a Livewire Lance in hand as well, Thijs is increasing his chances of hitting the Ankar with it. Interesting that he went coin Tolvair without the Rampage follow-up in hand. That's usually like the trigger point for wanting to coin that thing out, is that you are immediately following up with the Rampage. Thijs has a much more like vanilla coin 2 into 2 play, and now you see the initiative switching back to Hunterace here as he potentially becomes the player who can drop the first Rampage.
Yeah, I do like it overall though from Thijs, because in this matchup, I think you want to be the one controlling the board. Again, by no means am I an expert in this matchup whatsoever, but I think there are generally 2 ways. You play tempo, and if you're not playing tempo, then you have to store stuff up and try and like maybe AoE the board down with risky skippers into the bomb wranglers and like armor smiths, things like that. You have to try and like clear the board that way and become the defender. But I think that's only the option if you very visibly get pushed back from your opponent becoming the tempo.
Sure. The bump there from Thijs, the 2-3 into the 2-3, really made the Rampage a lot less appealing there for Hunterace, I should say. So he just chose to go mana efficiency instead, just develop Livewire Lance. But I do agree with your assessment. I think there are multiple ways to play it. But I think the one thing I will say is, from my experience in the matchup, if you're going to push, if you're going to try and be aggressive and end the game, you have to be really confident. Because if that push fails, you lose.
Right.
Like you've just spent all your cards, your opponent's been more efficient, and then they just clear your board with a risky skipper or whatever else, and you've essentially like reset to 0, but your opponent has like 7 cards in hand and you have 2. And like that's a disaster. And
that is my hopelessness point in this knowledge of this matchup, is if you don't just push aggro style, then where do you decide is the part of the game where you start to play? Do you know what I mean? Like, what do you have in hand that makes it so that you win in the combo style? Do you know what I mean? Like, what are you actually looking for, and how does that even execute? Because that is the bit I just don't know, if I'm completely honest.
I mean, it's just playing resources a lot of the time. It's also like manipulating battle rages and things like that. Just trying to make sure you end each turn with you having minions on board and your opponent doesn't, while being as efficient as possible with your resources. Because that state, like essentially the state Hunterace is in now, he has every option in the game available to him if it was in his hand, right? Like, he could make Bloodsworn Mercenary plays, he could make Battle Rage plays. If he had sources of damage, he can eat his whole board and then resummon it with 1/1. You know, all of these things are available to him because he's in control of the board and because he's the player that's sticking minions. So I think that is just step number one. The scary thing is that then naturally leads into you having the advantage and wanting to push face because you have minions in play, and that's where it gets scary, because then you start giving up board control to push damage, and then the whole thing can flip on its head.
Right, I agree, and this is now a little bit scary from Thijs, I think, in that he has made the push, he has the minions on board, but that board is very clearable. A risky skipper and one thing, which Hunterace 100% always has, because at worst he could swing the weapon to gain a lackey. But also for Thijs, if this board gets cleared, his refill is very meek, right? He has risky skipper, the pirate, battle rage, and yes, that's 3 cards, but that's also the majority of his turn, which means, is that going to be too slow and too little to actually stop Hunterace if he can clear this board and finish the turn with some level of threat? Looks like he's going to go for the Armor Smith, though, without a risky skipper.
Yeah, it was a point I was going to bring up, is that risky skipper is like kind of your number one resource in the entire matchup, so you do want to be kind of stingy with how you use it, essentially. So I think Hunterace is doing it here for the absolute minimum kind of makes sense, just getting the 1 proc off and otherwise just developing a huge board to try and soak some of these bomb shots.
And here we go, what's it going to look like? You wait till the very final point. There's 2 bombs that are going to go off here. Ooh, nice. The Armor Smith for 2 and just 3 to face is
ideal,
perfect.
pretty much. Damn, yeah.
I guess Armor Smith for 1 would have been better, so the risky skipper gets 1 extra charge if it even lives, which it won't. But still, it was pretty perfect there for Hunterace, and now...
I mean, face for 1 twice if you want to get really picky about it, Raven.
Don't make me escalate this. I'm like, if the game bugged and he hit his own face for 1 twice. Anyway, risky skipper here for Thijs, and this is the bit I'm worried about, and this is, I think, the real breaking point here. If Thijs has like 1 bad turn now, it can look pretty scary. But he's going to start off with a skipper.
I think this is actually going to work out pretty well here for Thijs, though, because he can clear this board plus Battle Rage here, and this kind of creates the scenario I was talking about right at the start, where Hunterace got out ahead early. He pushed. I don't think he over-pushed or anything like that, but he was just in control because he had the more aggressive start. And then you see the situation where Thijs is basically able to reset to 0 here, and now he has 7 cards in his weapon and has 2.
Yes, and honestly, I did not really cross my mind to just inner rage the enemy minions if you needed to. I was kind of living in the world where, well, what if the draw from the pirate's bad? You know, kind of like it was, honestly, and then you can't do both, and then suddenly you feel like a whole turn behind. But as you mentioned, Thijs has got this job done, and he didn't even need the inner rages as well, which means he has got an absolute plethora of resources here to do almost what he wants with at this point.
Yep. Good news for Hunterace, though, is that Thijs is going to find himself out of risky skippers, which is, of course, the power card that makes the deck work. So Hunterace might be able to build a board quite effectively here, but it's still quite fragile.
And now Thijs has to just deconstruct this hand and work out exactly what he wants to achieve. Because especially with Hunterace on 1 card, and Hunterace having used a risky skipper, Thijs has to assume he does not have Battle Rage. I think that's a fair assumption right now. Because I think Hunterace would have definitely like built a Battle Rage turn instead of just throwing things out there, especially having the health advantage. So I think now Thijs, if he just clears this board in really any way and ends the turn with a minion or 2, or even a minion and a weapon, or just one or the other, he's in a extremely good spot. So I think he won't be trying to do anything too fancy here. He just wants removal, even if he has to like Corkron the Armor Smith or something. You know, I'm okay with that. Like, just get stuff off the board now, because this looks like Hunterace's last push.
Just straight up spends the 5 on the Blood Boil. Interesting. Instead of going with a different minion, leaving the injured minions on board. There was also like an interesting talking point from Hunterace on the previous turn, who just shipped face with the Kor'kron Elite and left the Risky Skipper up. Essentially said, like, I need this damage to go face, and your Risky Skipper only activates once anyway, because it's a 1-1 on board, so I'm just okay with that. So there's actually a couple of really interesting turns back and forth with a lot of branching decisions from both players, honestly, even though Hunterace has very limited options at his disposal.
Yeah, and even to go one deeper, if there was a Rampage, Hunterace would have been in trouble, for the Risky Skipper. So very, very scary all around. But now Hunterace is just living on this 9-4, sticking to the board, and as Thijs is showing us quite rightly now, he can kill it whenever he likes.
Yep. He can pretty much do anything he likes whenever he likes with the quality of his hand right now, or at least the size of his hand. And it does look like this is going to come down to what I was talking about right at the start, which is now Thijs has gained control. He's the player with the resources. He drew the Battle Rage. He was able to shut down the early aggression, and now he's just going to be able to grind Hunterace out piece by piece.
Yep, and just a little note as well, it's a little bit more common in the bomb variants of Warrior, but Hunterace is not playing Deathwing, which means, there isn't the chance, right, where you just play a Deathwing, it sticks, you kill him with it. So that's just not there. The top end is these Blood Boil Brutes, green skin, 1 Kor'kron, and 2 War Maul challenges. So really, like, Hunterace has not got the sort of beef in the late game to even be able to hope for something off the top here.
Pretty good options, honestly. Card that you play in your deck already in Rampage, and then 2 options that can just shut down any kind of weird burst lethal that Hunterace can put together, because now he does have the Bloodsworn Mercenary. Not sure how many Kor'krons Hunterace is playing in his deck. Some people have gone down to 1. Yeah, Hunterace is also, so he's out of Kor'krons. So he doesn't even actually have the charge damage available to be able to Bloodsworn with an Inner Rage. But if that were a possibility, these shield blocks and sword and board would be pulling Thijs out of range.
It's interesting now. I think the sword and board won due to mana cost more than anything, because I really think even though Thijs is down to 9 cards, you're not taking this to fatigue even if you shield block, you know what I mean? Like, that's never going to happen. So I think I personally would have gone for shield block there, because it's just more armor, that just to really move that 0.1% chance to just 0 in terms of health. But like I said, it doesn't look like it's really going to impact it either way. And sword and board is a very cheap universal tool.
So is this the plan now for Hunterace? Try and get something inside that Terron and then injure it, Bloodsworn it, try and get back on board that way? Is that the best we've got?
I mean, that's just our plan, so it's definitely better than what I've got. So... second turn.
Thijs is way ahead of you.
Yeah. I actually think Thijs could have copied anything there. He could have done it to the Armor Smith and it still would have been fine, Like, I think it's almost at this point where it's not going to be good enough. And there is an egg and there's Terran, and maybe that's just the play, but I think we're probably not too far away from Hunterace just calling this game a day.
Nailed it. Absolutely nailed it. Crushed it, Raven.
Easy.
What a call.
I know,
This is why you get paid the medium bucks.
The very, very regular. But anyway, that is going to be a win for Thijs, and I think you see there how quickly the mirror can turn, and what I was kind of talking about earlier, where I don't think you can go into the game with a plan. To say, okay, I'm going to be the defensive player here and try and just combo them down. I think you just have to really take it as it comes, because at early game, it looked fairly even. 1 turn for Thijs, 1 Battle Rage, game over for many, many turns after that, honestly.
Yep, it's kind of gone over it multiple times already, but that really is the story. Battle Rage is the card in the matchup. If both players, kind of draw an equivalent level of Battle Rage to each other, then the games can, be much more difficult to navigate. But I think, after us hyping it up as so difficult to play for so long, I think that was about as straightforward as it gets. And there was still a lot of opportunity for either player to just throw that game in the bin on any given turn. But because the quality of the hands, I guess, was so tilted in one direction, it ended up being a little bit more straightforward than we might have expected.
Yeah, and it looks like the players, at least so far across the EU region, have decided or come to the conclusion that Warlock is the ban, as both players have banned Warlock once again, which means, shock horror, we are going to be seeing Demon Hunters, as Thijs does have his, I believe, the Tempo Demon Hunter list, and he does have his Spell Druid as well, or Token Druid, whatever you want to call it, left. So it means that he's basically, Thijs is playing the 3 decks right now, at least in my opinion, the Warlock. But these are just, if you're going to submit just a 4-deck list, I think I would have gone with this, just the tried and tested right now.
You heard it here first. Thijs and Raven on the same level.
I mean, I thought that was obvious. That's not news, is it?
I guess not, no.
But anyway, let's get into the Demon Hunter Mirror, and I believe, Hunterace is also on the Tempo list, right?
He's also playing Tempo, yeah. He's playing Questing Adventurers. He's only playing 1 Satire Overseer. He's playing Questing Adventurers as his additional 3-drop threats, which I do think is the most fun version of the Tempo deck that you can play. I don't necessarily know if I feel that it's the strongest.
I like it a lot. It's the version, not this card for card, but Questings is the version I've played the most. And okay. I feel like it's similar to what you talked about earlier, right? So many Demon Hunter minions are 2 health, right?
Yep.
Well, people aren't used to dealing with something that's like a 5/5 or 6/6 early on. So then there's always, the questing always ends up just still there. And I very consistently get 1 to 2 decent sized attacks from it. And I feel like in this list, that is all you need to win a game.
Hunterace already not a fan of his position.
There is not a battle fiend on his side of the board, therefore he is annoyed.
Yeah. He is also choosing, you see an Ooze in hand, he's playing 2 copies of Acidic Swamp Ooze in his deck. And he's just decided he's gonna have to bite the bullet and just take 1,000,000 damage from this Battle Fiend in order to clear it out.
My question here, though, is I think I would have been tempted to coin Ooze and say there needs to be an extra point of the weapon swing for it to stop it trading with the Battle Fiend. What do you think about that? Do you think that is too risky? And do you think Hunterace is, navigating this correctly by just saying, I'm going to take the damage and deal with it?
I would personally say that with the cost of his hand right now, ignoring that Twin Slice, which was the draw this turn, so he didn't have that information, how expensive his hand is, using the coin on turn 1 was kind of illegal for the position that he was in. I think now situation has changed because A, he picked up the Twin Slice, and B, the worst possible scenario follow-up came down, which was the Frenzied Fellwing coming down on top of that 4 damage for 0 on the following turn. So he now just kind of has to panic a little bit, but I think coining on 1, based on what his hand looked like, it just would have looked pretty ugly. And you've got to remember, of course, he's also playing double Questing Adventurer, as we were talking about, so the coin is an extremely valuable card in his deck just to begin with. Agreed.
I will say now, though, if this is his panic play, not as much need to panic from Hunterace now, as you'll get to see this follow-up is pretty meager from Thijs. And any turn that Altruist sticks and you get to do it again is insane. And Hunterace, especially with the Spectral Sight off the top, into a mana burn. Thijs is not allowed to play this game.
I might still be the only person in the world that still gets hype about Demon Hunter, but I just love it. Outcast is so fun.
I agree. I do not get hyped about Altruist going face. I think that is completely broken. But yes, the draws make a massive, massive impact into the game.
Yep. Chooses Battle Fiend on top, it looked like there. Just making sure he can curve out.
I think that's, I mean, he's got, it's tough, right? He just needs something to be able to play and just utilize these cards in his hand with. But the issue for Thijs is that this is so many turns worth of plays. Like, you can't even do anything. Whereas Hunterace now is just going to start just playing stuff because he still has Altruis on the board. It is insane. Even this, an extremely weak Altruis turn, well, it's probably not going to die the next turn unless there's exactly the weapon. And then he has just Skull of Gul'dan sitting there for the short term. Metamorphosis is available just to lock in and not even necessarily use. The Warglaives of Azinoth can be locked in and used as Hunterace needs. I think this was a bad start for him, but the Altruis has really saved the day right now.
And I think this mana burn was actually a pretty big reason why the Battle Fiend was put on top for Thijs. I think there were two reasons. Firstly, his hand goes 5/6/5, so at some point, having a 1-mana card available was going to fit into his curve naturally. But secondly, he knows that Hunterace plays double mana burn in his deck. So if he gets mana burned with that as his hand, he needs to draw something cheap to be able to do anything on that turn. So I think that was actually a pretty smart recognition from Thijs, but it's just nowhere near good enough.
Altruis has done about 1 million damage this game. It's insane.
Anything that we can say in terms of points of analysis are relatively irrelevant because Altruis has just carried that game from Hunterace.
It is
Picked it up in a
absurd.
sack, slung it over her back, and just marched to victory for Hunterace there. That was a complete single card carry.
Yes, we will see once the the next balance patch actually comes out in terms of details, but I believe Altruis is going to be looked at. But up until that point, I feel like it's the next Van Cleef. One, it was insane when it came out. I'm surprised it didn't get nerfed before it was even released. Then he managed to dodge the first set of like heavy Demon Hunter nerfs, and you see some of the potential of that card. It's absolutely huge. Like, the damage is put out is normally fantastic the turn you do it, but if it ever sticks, it just gets absurd because it works so well with the Demon Hunter kit that you're always going to get that level of value.
Yep. I will say that the other that twin slice draw was everything for Hunterace on the turn because it allowed him to set that up. Like, without that, he was scrapping. He would have just played Ooze that turn. That wouldn't have got him very far, and probably Thijs would have just been able to curve through the bombs in his hand because he basically had all the bombs available to him. But because that twin slice appeared and was able to clear the board, suddenly the entire series, the entire game, and in fact the entire series has flipped on its head because that is now Hunterace squaring things up.
Okay, so it is all squared up 1-1. We've got plenty more games to come up, but we are just going to go to a quick break, just give the players a minute to pick what deck they're going to run in for the next game. But plenty more Hearthstone coming up. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with some more Hearthstone Grandmasters.
Hello everybody, I'm TJ. I'm joined by America's Grandmaster Bloodyface. Bloodyface, how you doing today?
Doing all right, I guess. How you doing, TJ?
I don't know, man. I've been feeling a little bit emotional today.
I have days like that too. It's got you down.
Do you ever just ask yourself, I mean, what's the point of doing all these interviews? Life is already just questions and answers. Why add more, you know?
I've been asking myself that for years. Ever since my first championship, they asked me some questions, I gave some answers. You guys keep asking me the same questions every time.
You're right.
Sometimes there's no good answer, TJ.
I mean, what even is Hearthstone? Is it some dystopian representation of the complex problems our fragile, corrupted society faces? Melancholy.
Exactly.
So you excited for Grandmasters?
We are back and ready to continue this series between Thijs and Hunterace. It is all even 1-1 so far in this best of 5, with Hunterace taking a win on his Demon Hunter and Thijs taking a win in that No Hands Warrior mirror. We've got plenty more to come. And my big question point, I guess, for Hunterace's lineup, Sottle, is the Priest. Do you think it's got what it takes in the current, sort of meta that is generated in these groups?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's not a deck that I've got around to playing a ton myself. I'm kind of with you. I don't quite match your vitriol towards this deck, but I'm kind of with you in that it's not a deck that I'm, going to choose to play myself for entertainment purposes. But if it's strong, I'll play the strong decks. It's just the kind of guy I am. But based on what we saw in APAC, I think it underperformed in the matchups you'd potentially be expecting it to win. Like the way some of those decks were built, it looked like it was like anti-Demon Hunter builds of Res Priest that was just then losing to Demon Hunter, for example.
Right.
But then in to exchange for that, it was sort of overperforming in some of the other matchups. So I think still big question marks is exactly where Res Priest's role in this tournament is. But I do think that with the strategy that we're seeing a lot in EU, it looks like, at least based on the Swiss, of leaving Demon Hunter up, it is perhaps a sensible deck to be including in your lineup.
All right, so we're going to find out what Priest can do at some point, I imagine. But for now, it does sound like they might be good. But overall, let's take a look at what we're getting into. It's going to be Thijs on the Druid, and Hunterace is going to be on this Warrior once again. And this is a very interesting matchup for me, because I feel like whenever I play Druid or play against Druid, it's just about waves of unclearable minions. But if there's ever a deck that can deal waves of damage, it is this Warrior deck. My only question, Saul, to you is does Risky Skipper require like 10 health to be able to do this properly? Or is it enough in as it is now?
No, you can just about get there, especially when you have access to a little bit of a health buff, maybe from Rampage or something else. But even then, sometimes 3 damage is enough a lot of the time, because it really shuts down the Panic Glowfly Swarm, which is the play that you're kind of forced into if a deck is being aggressive against you. You just kind of jam out the Glowfly Swarm and hope it competes. Egg Warrior has the ability to just blow straight through that with Risky Skipper and keep going, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah, and then honestly, looking at the list, I'll just double check, since I have got it in front of me, if I can find Thijs' list. Yeah, so checking out this Druid, it does not really have any of the AoE removal tools that were played with a little bit, maybe in the first few days of people playing this Druid list. There were lists with Starfall in, there was the occasional swipe. They're kind of just gone now. They're kind of extinct. So that means that Thijs doesn't really have great answers, especially when these means Death Rattle minions or buffable health or 4 health even. There's nothing that quite lines up well removal wise, and that might be a huge problem for him to try and fight back from this aggression from Hunterace right now.
That's just a 110.
Did you see Ike's deck list, by the way?
I did not know. What is it?
He was like, here's the list. It's a Warmaw, Challenger, a Commanding Shout list. Because it will just kill anything, right? And I was like, yep, that's an Ike list. That happened. It's just no surprise.
Yep. That sounds about right.
Yeah. Now, Hunterace has not gone that deep, but these guys are going to be good in things like the Mirror against Demon Hunter. It's a ton of health, and if they ever get rampaged and then copied with the Bloodsworn Mercenary, wow, you've got some big minions to deal with. Definitely a strange shaped minion, isn't it? At 110. I imagine sitting on Thijs' side of this game and going, what am I actually going to do about that? It seems
Take one.
Yeah,
every turn.
That's what I mean,
idiot.
right? You look at it and go,
yeah.
Does that die? Does it not die? Do I just pretend it's not there? Is there ever a world where Argus gets played at some point? So that's my question.
What, with this?
Yeah, just a 211.
Now it's a 211.
Hey, that thing's immortal.
Yeah, this is now the situation I was talking about, right? Where, like, against a lot of decks that were developing early like this, you'd just jam out early Glowfly and just, think you were relatively safe in being able to compete for the board for the next couple of turns. But Thijs knows that he's walking a tightrope if he does that, because the board that Hunterace has even is incredibly resistant to Risky Skipper itself on the other side. So,
and also the fact he has a Blood Boil Brute means that, you know, because it's so resistant, it just makes these easier and easier to activate. And again, Druid and Thijs doesn't really have a great answer to a Blood Swan Brute. And there we go. Well,
this turn, Raven. This turn is illegal.
This one's going to hurt, isn't it?
It's a cost 0 no matter what he does, right?
Yeah. And do you War Maul Challenger last so it doesn't fight anything?
No, you're not. I don't think you're going to play the War Maul Challenger this turn. You're going to go Horde Pillager instead.
Oh, okay, okay.
Just for more aggression, potentially? Although you'd have to play that first. No, that doesn't work. Yeah, I guess you do end up going War Maul Challenger then.
Hunterace is just a Battle Rage away from a good time right now, isn't he? Because I think the Battle Rage is just all he needs to cap off. Oh, I might be going a bit crazy, but to cap off this game, if he just draws a Battle Rage like next turn. Because these challengers just aren't going to die, which means there's always extra card draws coming.
Zero, lovely stuff.
Yeah.
Boom. Yeah. So ideally, like, you know, okay, I know it's ridiculous to say, well, if in a perfect world, this turn could have been even better. But, you know, the Horde Pillager could have come down with potentially another weapon that turn, but because it only has 2 health, it would have ended up blowing itself up on the Risky Skipper board, which is why he ends up going Challenger instead.
Yeah, I do like this overall. Thijs, he's gonna just do what he can, but that's just not a lot right now. Also, just to know, Thijs has not ramped. So it means that he's playing a very fair game, which Druids are not used to. Druids are just known cheaters in terms of, in the mana department at least, which means that his deck is not equipped to play at this rate. It needs to be played with the ramp to have its power. And as you can see, look, it's 3 8-cost cards in his hand. Like, that's not good on 5 mana. And Thijs is really struggling right now, and he might not be able to dig his way out of this.
Yeah, even that Kael'thas is looking like it's coming up a little bit short right now because those Bog Beams in hand aren't free and still won't be free next turn for Thijs. Again, because of that lack of ramp that you were talking about. Just means so much damage is going to come through so quickly.
Treasure? Loot? What more can I ask for?
Yeah, Hunterace now, again, I did mention the Battle Rage, but still he has access to plenty of cards. The Corsair Cachet, the Live Wire Lance, sorry, means that although he doesn't have strict card draw, he kind of still does. Even with that Hench Clan means he's got access to so many resources. There is an overgrowth from Thijs though, so he does get to play the game at least a little bit.
Yeah.
But But what does he do? He has to beam the 4-2, right?
There's 15 represented on board right now. So
is he that confident he's not going to die?
Choose to greed it, which he does, yeah. Oh my goodness, have your entire deck, Hunterace.
Wow. No, that's just a lot of cards, Sol. I'm not got any fancy words for that one. That's just a lot. Now it looks like there is... How much damage have we got? 10? 15 plus X. I mean, there is still Hench Clan. There is still just Captain Greenskin to give him an extra damage and charge of that Ankar. I mean, it's pretty much anything he wants right now. I do wonder if it's just the second Brute.
Just to have the huge minion in play.
Yeah, just chuck it down. Like, how does it die? You know, is my question. It just doesn't.
Sure.
But it did go for the greenskin, and I'm not going to complain at that one. It gives him a whole extra swing of that weapon. But now, if there's ever a moment, it's now.
There are now possibilities for Thijs. He needed card draw this turn, either Fungal Fortunes or Overgrowth, because his hand, as it stood, did not do enough to be able to counteract this. Still nothing.
he needed the innovates because he didn't just need one proc, he needs two, because he needs to get the tokens down and taunt them, as you mentioned.
Correct.
So he can't do both right now because there aren't enough 0-cost spells. So does he have to? He can't even use one now to draw, right? He can't play.
You just kind of you just reset your position essentially.
Oh,
but
so
you know it's not good enough to just not draw cards. So you have to just try and draw cards and high roll essentially.
Time waits for no one.
Oof. I mean, this is just a bad spot, isn't it? And there's double
he
innovate.
found the 2 innovates.
Can he lock it in? No, he's under some rope pressure.
Innovate, Wrath, generate the board, innovate,
It does
Bolt
work.
Beam, give everything taunt. Yeah, he's found it.
And Thijs, like a pro, has locked it in, a slight nod of the head. And you know what? Fair play, because that was not a fun turn to actually make with the overflow straight away. That was risky, but it paid off.
Speaking of risky, does the skipper have anything to say about this? It needs to do 4, which is, of course, somewhat illegal with it only having 3 health, but you only need your 6/8 and your 1/10s to connect with face, so it doesn't matter how many of your own minions you kill here.
Yeah, no rampage as well.
Just allocating all of these 1 damage sources, which he needs. Because he cannot do all 4 damage with the risky skipper. He needs those minions to go in, but that now means that his challenges can't hit face, so he's relying just on the brute that's in play and the weapon. Don't think it works. So he's just resigned to clearing instead? Yeah. Okay.
To be fair, he just saw what Thijs had to do to make that board. He probably cannot do it again, which means that if he can just clear in any way, then he's got the eggs, he's still got plenty of cards, he's got Live Wire Lance, he's fine to play a longer game, because it's not going to be long enough for Thijs to recover, I think.
Yep.
And I think that's a fair assumption based on what Hunterace has seen.
Didn't see what the options were, but I did see Hunterace's face looking not very impressed with the options that he was presented with. End up taking Breath of the Wild, or Breath of the Infinite, I'm sorry.
I concede.
And just decided to play a little game of Zelda instead, you know,
Yeah,
no
why
big
not?
deal. Yeah.
But Hunterace does take it very close and almost snatched away from him by a very, very strong play by Thijs there. Just, honestly, just the overflow, it must have felt horrible to press that card. You know, in that position, you've got Kael'thas down, you go overflow and you're like, I know I'm going to burn cards. I know these cards have to be literally 2 innovates to be able to pop off. But it did work, but unfortunately for Thijs, it was not enough. And Hunterace takes a lead 2-1 in the series. But now we have the overall question, right? So the priest is left. So now it's, can Hunterace win with the priest? He might demolish Thijs and, like, you know, yes, the priest looks good, but this is the deciding factor and the big question point from me.
Yeah, I mean, it does have some matchups where it has game, at least. I think, you know, overall, the Druid usually reloads too often, too quickly for the Priest to compete with. I think quite often people give Priest too much credit for, like, always having the answers. My problem with Priest is that it doesn't draw cards. So therefore, you know, in the time that a card draw deck, which many of the strong decks in the metagame are right now, have got 25 cards deep into their deck, Priest has drawn like 12, you know, and they're just trying to compete with that, with the amount of greed that they have in their deck, essentially, just trying to pick up 3-for-1s and 4-for-1s on different cards. So it can do that, but Druid goes too quickly for it sometimes. But then I imagine Demon Hunter is the matchup that you're looking for here if you're building this priest deck the way that he has it built.
And I think for me as well, you know, I'm not the fan of Res Priest in any form or at all, but I will say that the Psycho Pump turns on like turn 5-6-ish, you know, like the first taunt or whatever, and then Psycho Pump are so mentally demoralizing that they probably stick with people way more than they should. That, you know, that people are just used to all those games, every single game where they taunt into Psycho Pump and then you just lose because you can never clear them. It doesn't happen that often. I think people give it a lot of credit because it feels so bad to lose to, but I do feel that this Hunterace list has something to prove because it isn't the standard taunt into res with all the taunts only. it does have some other cards like the Mana Saber mainly, which means that Hunterace can't just blindly rely on its summoning a taunt. It even plays Thanos as well, which is kind of crazy.
I think looking at the way he named his decks, I think he named this, like, in his submission, Ramp Priest, just essentially because he has a Mana Saver in his deck, you know? Like, so you can see that is kind of his game plan, is just to be able to get to that really late-game powerful stuff as early as he can with what limited tools that Priest has available to do that, but, you know, he's giving it his best shot.
Yeah, and funnily enough, a few interesting choices here, where there are 2 Breath of the Infinites, and 1 Holy Nova. And for me, Holy Nova being 4 mana is a massive change for Priest. It's insane.
It is.
And
It is.
And I've been playing some actual Galakron Priest with no resurrect effects, just to put it on there. So people call me a two-faced or whatever. But the Holy Novas are actually insane at 4, and I don't know if Breath of the Infinite is that much better at 3. Because the healing factor is something to bear in mind.
I think against Demon Hunter specifically, it's massively important, right, to be able to do something on 3, because that's the turn where, like, Satire comes down, for example, and you just have to be able to react to the board or you're taking way too much damage. So I think in that matchup, having the 3-mana AoE is a really, really big deal. Okay, well, let's see how it pans out versus Druid. The Thanos is coming down early, so again, even with the Psycho Pump in hand, the pool is already polluted, I would say, actually, because the Thanos isn't a guaranteed block for any of this token pressure coming from Thijs. Oh, yeah? I never said he wouldn't do it, I'm just saying it's not a taunt. I was wondering whether Hunterace was going to go for the Grave on the Albatross and we just start having a very bird-focused game. Yeah. Looks like Hunterace just very much valuing card draw here. Wants to spend his mana, wants to retain his coin so he can curve into those power plays. The Soul Mirror is actually a very interesting card in this matchup. Just based on the, you know, if they build just a board of 2/2s, then obviously that's a clear. If they build a Soul of the Forest board, then you essentially like match them. You know, you kill all their minions, and both of you spawn the Treants afterwards. So it actually has a lot of really interesting applications in this matchup, I think. Yeah, it's definitely going to be a tough one for Hunterace to navigate here because it's not that straightforward, especially because Thijs has the ramp. And now it's just gone off with Kael'thas, which means pretty much anything's possible this turn. He does have 3 more 0-mana spells available to him. Yeah. Which way do you think he wants to go here? Do you think he just goes for the Glowflies? I would expect so. I'm a little bit surprised even that the Kael'thas was actually committed this turn. I don't know if it was necessary to come down here. I'm worried about. Now it's here. You need to get some use out of it and build a board, right? Well, this is I was taking steps with you where the Kael'thas I wasn't 100% on board with, and then as soon as that happened, I was like, oh well, I don't think I could play the Glowflies here. But if you don't, then why did you play the Kael'thas? And then the problem is you look at just a clear here, and suddenly it's Thijs feels like he's kind of all in on Mount Seller. Which is never a spot you want to be in. So, yeah, very, very interesting choices by Thijs. I'm not sure it's going to pan out too well for him because it's not like Hunterace is low on cards right now. That's a free choice. Great answers to this right now, though. What if he just... Oh, yeah, it's kind of tough, isn't it? Like, the only thing in his hand that, quote, deals with the Kael'thas is Master Spell. And that just, like, leaves you open to 1,000,000 damage on the backswing anyway. It's tough, isn't it? So, my thoughts were, or you can drill it down to, is Kael'thas being alive a bigger problem than what Thijs could do next turn without Kael'thas? Yeah, I think they're both horrible problems. I think they're both horrible, but I think I would have Master Spelled. Really? Because I feel like Kael'thas does the most broken things, and
Hunterace is running multiple AoE and multiple taunts in his deck.
Sure.
So I feel like it's more feasible to keep clearing or blocking the board than it would be to leave Kael'thas up. Because this is scary. What's about to happen now?
It is for sure.
And only a Glowfly died. And Hunterace shake of the head there. And maybe this is me being too, I don't know, too thoughtful about what Kael'thas can do, but this outcome would terrify me, which is why I think I would have just forced myself to Master Spell in the previous turn.
Right. Maybe this was just always the plan from Thijs, where he's saying that, you know, my Kael'thas is very difficult for you to kill in this position anyway, so I'm just going to drop it here just in the expectation that it's going to live a turn. I mean, Hunterace does play a copy of Shadow Word Death in his deck, which, you know, would have solved an awful lot of problems for him that turn, but apart from that, there really wasn't a good way that his deck lined up against that, apart from Master Spell, which, as we've been talking about for the last, like, 2 minutes, it's not really a win if you just Master Spell that board and pass, is it? Like, that you're still in a terrible position, whether you want to argue it's a better terrible position than the one you'd be in otherwise.
Yeah, one thing... just going off what you were talking about earlier in terms of Soul Mirror, as it is in hand for Hunterace, the 7-mana legendary, if you can't tell, and you're not used to the pictures yet. But yeah. I'm waiting for the Soul Mirror, and obviously the Kael'thas lives for Hunterace, and then he just pops off with his spells. You know, like, things like that can happen, and I think manipulating the Soul Mirror is one of the most fun parts of that card. But I don't know if it's going to be enough at this point. What about Coin Master Spell? He's not bothered. This one has actually shocked me. The other one surprised me. This one has shocked me, Sol.
This is Ramp Priest, Raven. He can't be using his ramp cards for such frivolous
It's going to be Dead Priest in a minute, Sol. This Kael'thas is just going to do what he wants. Like, what? Surely that Coin Master Spell was worth then. Surely.
Hunterace is still so far away from Plague of Death and only plays a single copy of the card in his deck, which is not in his hand right now. And as I was mentioning beforehand, you don't draw cards in this deck. Pretty much see the exact relationship I was talking about. 7 cards remaining for Thijs, 17 remaining for Hunterace.
I wonder if he had to coin Master Spell and then just hope that Soul Mirror got him there.
It doesn't, though, does it?
The
problem is that like the shape of the minions that are going to come down, the Kael'thas that you'd leave behind would be vulnerable. Wouldn't be vulnerable to Soul Mirror. If an exotic Mount Seller comes down, it's not vulnerable to Soul Mirror. You know, like all this stuff is just kind of a mess.
I feel like Kael'thas has made so many more options for Thijs than the drawbacks of just popping the Master Spell would have done. It's tough.
Is it making sense to you yet, Raven? Do you see the lines?
I do see it, and if this was the plan all along, which I wouldn't
I'm
doubt,
pretty sure it was.
Would
I'm not going to claim
I've
literally only just figured it out as it's happening, but now seeing it happen, like, yeah, I'm pretty sure this is exactly what he was planning the entire time.
This is, you know, okay, so this is like genius level play, right? If he did this on purpose, and if there's someone who's going to do it, it's Hunterace. My only worry is...
It's lined up too perfectly.
My only worry is, I feel like he could have died like 3 different times this game.
I'm not sure he could. Because every turn he AoE'd everything else apart from the Kael'thas, right? So he was never under the reach of Savage Roar or anything like that.
He left it up... Oh, I guess he left it up 1 turn, right? Because there was the Glowfly. There was a Glowfly turn.
He left it up 1 turn when he put Convincing Infiltrator in the way. So like he wasn't going to get lethal through that anyway. Then the next turn he AoE'd and isolated the Kael'thas.
Maybe it was less of a chance. Maybe it was less of a chance than I thought.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm giving Kael'thas too much credit. Maybe I've been brainwashed.
You're not giving Hunterace enough credit.
Any credit left to give to Hunterace. Okay. He's got it all. Okay. He cashed that in last year. What are you on about?
Yeah. But no, this was like super smart. The idea, like I I was processing in my head like this sucks because we're gonna Soul Mirror and then his Kael'thas isn't gonna die. I failed to extend that in my brain to well that also means our Kael'thas is not gonna die.
I did say that earlier on, and I said I was waiting for it, so if anything it proves that I'm the genius in this scenario, as I called it many turns earlier, but as I said, it's impressive to pull off, and the fact that he lined up certain cards to do this and to actually get the 0 mana spell on that turn as well. Fair play.
Yeah.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah, no, that's really sick. So now he's in a position where potentially if he can find that one Plague of Death that is in his deck, he can potentially set out to achieve some kind of fatigue scenario.
But also this, right? Like, this isn't bad. The Murzon just saying, well, if you make tokens, so can I. Really wants it to go on a 2/2. Oh.
Unlucky. For 3 as well. What unlucky.
It's just like a quit hitting yourself moment, that, isn't it?
It was, yeah.
But now, how does Thijs deal with this? No Soul of the Forest means that he can't say just, Soul of the Forest and then trade away and say, well, I've still got tokens and you don't. He does have a pretty big buff, but is that enough? Wait, is it Schleathon? I've just not counted.
I think it is, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Cut me off next time, Soft.
3. Sorry. I was just going to let you hang yourself for a bit longer.
Cheers, mate.
23 with
Appreciate
the hero power,
it.
I believe.
Did Thijs just, dab a little bit then? It looked like it.
I'm not sure if that was like a stretch or a... I think he's just stretching. I think he's just, shaking it off.
Fair enough, fair enough. And he should be chilling right now. He has gone 2-2 versus this Priest. And Hunterace playing off some pretty cool moves, but it just wasn't quite enough. And I think, as you mentioned, everything just seemed a little bit too far away for Hunterace. There was no Plague of Death, and he wasn't even really there as well. He seemed to be playing on 4 mana when, guess what, Druid was on much more. But Thijs really just, I think, kept his cool there. And although I think we might have pulled the trigger on Kael'thas a bit early, he managed to keep hold of it. And as you rightly pointed out, maybe he just had the knowledge that, well, if I make this and tokens, you probably can't deal with both.
Yeah, I think that was maybe a risk worth taking, like looking at the makeup of the deck list, that there was only really one Shadow Word Death that punished him for it.
Right.
And otherwise he was just going to get the scenario that happened. What I do find a little bit depressing there is that Hunterace kind of set that up really, really nicely for himself. But then the reason he died is because of those 2 spells that we were laughing at, right? Where he's just shot himself both times. Like, if he'd have won a 4 or whatever,
Well,
it was,
especially
even
the Wrath, right? Because the beam, well, the board's you've got more minions than your opponent. The beam's probably going to hit one of your own. But the Wrath on the 1v5 board is savage.
So that is got to be a little bit depressing if you're a Hunterace fan after he, set it all up really nicely to get to that point. Need to get kind of screwed by his Murzon rolls, but he will need to regather, and he is back on the Priest train, of course, because it's all he's got left to win with. Thijs now on the Demon Hunter, and as I was saying, I think this is potentially the matchup that you are looking for.
Yeah, and he's a bit more back on the ramp Priest Sottle, as he does have double Mana Saber, and if he really wants to, Shadowy Figure as well.
Yep. Just competing, 2-2 for 2-2. Just ignore the fact that Hunterace paid twice as much for his 2-2 as his opponent did. Everything will be fine.
And I like this play. Obviously, it's better than just passing, taking damage, and letting Thijs build up some board. But one tip against the Tempo Demon Hunter is if in any way you can get them off board when you still have minions, you're in a fantastic spot. Because most of the time, Demon Hunter struggles to fight back on board. It really struggles outside of exactly Altruis, if it's the Tempo version.
Yep. And actually, it's weird to say, but the more aggressive version, the Tempo version, actually has less burst damage than the OTK version. Like, if you can force them off board, all they've really got is weapons. Kane Sun Fury for 3 damage from hand. Obviously, that is the big kicker because it goes through all defenses. But then outside of that, it's Glavebound Adept for 4 damage. Big deal.
Yeah, Metamorphosis, but that's definitely signaled, isn't it? Because it's live. And also, I was happy to find out that they are going to do a visual effect soon for it, which I was disappointed that there wasn't straight away.
Yeah, it's one of the things I do really like is that a lot more non-legendary cards now have, custom visual effects given to them. It used to be something that only really legendaries got, whereas now there's sort of a lot of unique animations for various things. I think that's a really big improvement for the way the game looks.
Yep, and they keep adding more, which is fine by me. Oh, just taking it on the chin from the Albatross there, but is good enough to keep the... Okay, this is what I want to ask you about right now, because we're going to be saying this word a lot. You say satire, I thought it was satyr.
Really?
Yes, am I just wrong? Is this just a Shaman Shaman thing? I don't know.
I don't know.
We're just going to hear in the background, satyr.
Satyr.
Satyr, okay.
Like the cable, apparently.
Okay, so satyr. I didn't think it was satire because I thought, well, that's just going to get confusing. Depending on what we're talking about. But yeah, okay, satyr.
As much as I love casting live events and are very depressed that we're having to do this from home right now, I do really like just having my PC right here. It's very useful. Right
now, though, as we're getting a lovely shot of Hunterace's hair, the Mana Saber #1 is down, which means it can start trading, and at 5 health it trades very well versus most of Thijs' minions in his deck, and also with options of either Psycho Pump, Grave Ruin, or another Mana Saber coming up soon, or even if he needs to push to the Kael'thas Defender, which will be live next turn with the attack from the Mana Saber. Hunterace is in a much better spot this game, I feel, than he was against Druid.
He is.
I feel like there's a but coming, so...
Yeah, he is a very large, round, and fulsome butt is coming. He is taking a ton of damage in the early game, though, because he hasn't been able to answer the 4-2, which is basically criminal. If that thing starts hitting you, you're usually having a bad time.
Right. This is some ramp, though, Sol.
That is some amount of ramp.
Wait,
yes,
did he?
That is incredibly exciting.
He just messed up, right? Oh no, he needed the mana. He didn't get stealth, but he needed the mana to play it, so he had to attack.
Yes, he needed
apologies.
to attack first, yeah.
I nearly ordered Lord. I nearly became that of which I hate. But yes, sorry, apologies. But also, I will say that Kael'thas Defender and a potential Psycho Pump res can do wonderful things for your health. So,
are you familiar with the card Kane's Sun Fury, Raven?
I am. I actually thought that Hunterace was going to go for the Kael'thas last turn with that extra mana.
Okay.
Okay. But he didn't. So we'll see how much this, I would say a little bit adventurous play pays off, because he went for the extreme ramp, which, as you can see, is very extreme. But is he just going to die because of it? Because I think he had the time to be a little bit safer there.
He is still just about hanging on, though. Kane coming down for 3, 5, 8 from the weapon, 1 from the hero powers, 9, and then second slice can be added to that for 10 this turn for Thijs.
So the important thing here is he does not play a minion that Kael'thas can trade into and die, right?
Correct.
So what he wants to do is probably just leave the board, maybe activate Metamorphosis and punch one with it, and then pass, and then set up next turn for the Kane, the Metamorphosis #2, and, you know, his weapon swing.
Those all sound like very reasonable things you just said.
He would also get... he can line up an extra swing as well, right? Oh, no, he can't. He can get the extra +1 damage after his second Metamorphosis as well, because he will have the mana to do that. So he does, what, 12 next turn? And if Thijs can make it, so Hunterace can't trade that off. This is looking like it. Yeah, it looks like it's wrapped up. I mean, don't get me wrong. It looks like the right play, but it's not exactly, you know, super genius level, is it? This just looks correct.
No.
Like,
I mean, I totally respect Thijs taking his full time here, because this is the most important play of the series up until this point. Like, quite literally, that play is probably going to decide who wins this series. So he definitely should take the full rope, but it does pretty clearly look like a Metamorphosis turn to me.
And Hunterace cannot kill now his Kael'thas.
Nope.
And funnily enough, Hunterace does run, I believe. He runs 2 Holy Smites, 2 Penance. He has ways in his deck that could have killed it off. Even his Breath of Infinite, because he doesn't have a dragon in his hand. He has ways in his deck that he could have drawn to kill the Kael'thas Defender, and he has not. And he has many ways to kill the Kael'thas Defender, and has not. So that is a strong play and the correct play from Thijs. maybe a little bit unfortunate from Hunterace, as I believe that is going to lock up this match, because he is nothing can stop the power of Kane's Fury. Not even taunts. So much
On the
mana.
plus side, he does have a million mana this turn.
Yes.
That's quite hilarious.
It's going to come down, set up very nicely, very clean from Thijs, and Hunterace could just not quite hold on as Kane. Very unique effect, ignores all taunts while he's on the board, coming in clutch and winning Thijs the series over Hunterace. So Thijs progresses into the winner's side of the group to meet ball control. Hunterace is going to go to the lower side and meet Zim.
Yeah, crucially, the way Kane works, everything ignores Taunt while it's in play. If it was just a 3-5 charge that ignored Taunt on its own, sure, that's one thing. We could potentially handle that. The fact that all damage can get shipped through to face is the potentially ridiculous part, as you see there, just allowing Thijs a very kind of straightforward finish to that game, which, as mentioned, he did quite rightly take his sweet time over, just making sure that he was playing around all the outs. Because as Raven mentioned, there were, what, six outs from Hunterace's deck? At least that could have killed that Kael'thas defender and healed him up. But I think, the penances were probably the only really scary ones. Essentially, that's double heal. You get the lifesteal and you get the Kael'thas death rattle going off. I think potentially Thijs beat the other ones anyway. So there were things to consider that turn for sure. But it was kind of being shot in his face in very illuminated letters to just Metamorphosis go face that turn. And Thijs, of course, recognized it.
Right, and if you are just joining us after this match is just finished, we'll give you just a quick recap. This is effectively top 8 from the Swiss the players have played in the previous 2 days. So we see 8 of the 16 players, and now they're playing through a group. We're doing Group A today. We're on Match 3 coming up now, and we have Group B tomorrow. And what these players are playing for now and throughout the whole of the first 3 weeks of Grandmasters are points. The better you do each week in the tournament, the more points you gain. After 3 weeks, they get added together, and then that means they decide what divisions we go into going forward for the final 4 weeks of Grandmasters. But while we get the next match ready, we are just going to go to a short break. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with some more Hearthstone.